On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County, let me welcome you here this morning. I'm Louisa Young, President of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that encourages active and informed participation in government. We never support or oppose a political candidate, but we do support or oppose issues. I note that we have 7 of the 8 legislators present this morning who represent any part of Boulder County, and we're delighted to have you here. The format will work like this. Jeanette Hillary, who is a member of the League and a volunteer lobbyist at the state legislature, will moderate this meeting. She has a fairly informal style that I know you will all enjoy. She will bring out some of the issues that are important to the League and engage the legislators on those issues. We will take questions from the audience. They need to be in writing, and you will see ushers circulating throughout the room that have pencils and paper. And the ushers will collect these questions and take them to our reviewers, who will screen for duplication. Jeanette will be given the questions, and she will ask as many as time permits. Some photos will be taken this morning, and this event will be recorded for rebroadcast on local public channels. Some of you may find your face on these photos and rebroadcasts, and we put a notice on the door alerting you to that fact. If you object to being shown in these photos or recordings, now is your opportunity to leave. We ask that anyone who records this forum in any format, please respect the League's nonpartisanship, follow the FCC rules to preserve the context or meaning, intent of what is being said, and air the recording in its entirety. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jeanette Hillary.
Thank you. And thank you, and good morning. I am also very excited to see so many of our elected officials here for Boulder County, and it's unfortunate that Representative Primavera at the last minute was unable to attend, but I know we're going to have some excellent information and good discussion among yourselves and information to the audience. So without further ado, I wanted to start with Senator Matt Jones, and all of you will be given 2 minutes to sort of do an overview of what your thoughts are on the present session, any specific bills you're following and have promoted or whatever, and then we'll go and get into very specific areas later on for discussion. So, Senator Jones.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate this. It's on. Do you hear me now? Okay. Try that. Does that help? So, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. What I try to do in this session is remind myself of what my priorities were to begin the session, and I'll run through them really quickly. Jobs, we've been working on that. I think Senator Heath and Representative Hollinghurst might mention the clean energy work that they're doing for jobs. I did a bill this year to help veterans make sure they keep their certification when they come back from active duty so that they can get right back to work, that kind of thing. Education, funding is a huge part of that. And we're just having that conversation now, but making sure money goes in the classroom. We're also passing a bill, or there's a bill in the works that will likely pass that caps tuition at higher education universities at 6% and puts $100 million more in there. We've been cutting these budgets for years now, and finally we're starting to fill in the hole that we've dug. It's a very deep hole. Third, environment issues. I do water conservation work, energy conservation work. We're adding on to a bill that Senator Schwartz and I passed last year that helps people in businesses put in energy conservation, like their furnace or lights, and pay for it with the savings. And now we're adding water fixtures to that. And then finally, the new issue this year for many of us that's very, very important is flood recovery. And one bill I sponsored with Representative Foote and a Republican by Senator Lundberg in Berthoud to make sure that counties can fix their roads by using their normal general fund in the road and bridge fund, which they weren't allowed to do. And that was the first flood bill passed this year. There are a number of other bills I'm sure others will talk about, but the priorities are what I focused on: jobs, schools, the environment, and flood recovery. And we still have, 32 more days as of today to do those things.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jean Nicholson, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am the other senator who represents Boulder. All of you know, of course, Senator Jones and Senator Heath, and I represent you as well, but I don't live in Boulder and am not as familiar with you or you with me as you are our other two wonderful senators who represent your area. I actually live in Gilpin County and represent 4 counties, including the towns of Superior and El Dorado Springs. I want to start by just describing what I think is the general tone of this session. I think that it is different than last year. It's less contentious. There are many more examples of us working closely in a bipartisan manner, and there are some major examples. For one, we passed an amendment to the Long Bill that would provide an air fleet for fighting wildfires. That was strongly supported in the Senate, and I expect will be strongly supported in the conference committee in order to help us mitigate the long-term impacts of catastrophic wildfires. Many of you, of course, experienced the 4 Mile Canyon fire and are well aware of other wildfires in the state that have been so devastating. And we in the Senate and the House, of course, are also painfully aware of the impacts of those fires. And while we don't believe in suppressing all wildfires, and we do believe in promoting forest health, we also think that it's very important for us to mitigate the impacts of catastrophic fires.
Okay, we will be covering more in the natural disaster area with a number of you who have been dealing with those bills specifically. Good morning, Representative Dickie Lee Hullinghorst.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think this is my 5th year doing this, and I always enjoy it. I'll look forward to your questions. I am the majority leader of the Colorado House of Representatives, and I also represent House District 10, which is the eastern side of the city of Boulder and eastern unincorporated Boulder County, neighboring many of my colleagues here. As the majority leader, my priorities are very much the priorities of the caucus and of the House of Representatives. And as such, the first priority for all of us is to pass a responsible and balanced budget. And we are well on our way to doing that. It passed the House last week and passed on 3rd reading, I believe, yesterday. You'll probably hear more from my colleague, Representative Heath, on that document. As it is now, I believe it's fairly close with a few changes to the original document that was passed by the Bipartisan Joint Budget Committee. In terms of our priorities, and those priorities are reflected in the budget, education is a very top priority for us. Investing in the future of our children is the most important responsibility that I believe we have in the state of Colorado. And that goes for preschool through K and higher education. In addition to that, our priority this year was to deal with the flood and wildfire recovery and to plan for the future in those areas which unfortunately we will see more of because of climate change being a reality. So you will hear more from others, I'm sure, about that. And finally, ensuring our economic stability, economic justice, and environmental sustainability is a very high priority in Colorado, and there are many bills relating to that which you will also hear about.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Senator Raleigh Heath.
Good morning, everyone, and glad to be here. And I think this, as far as we can tell, is historic in terms of you've got both majority leaders from the House and the Senate from the same county, from Boulder County, and I'm proud to be the Senate Majority Leader and to work with my great friend from 1971, I think, Dickie Lee. So the friendship goes back a long ways, and I'm proud to be able to work with her, and we do virtually every day on some major issues. We started the 69th General Assembly in the Senate with 20 Democrats and 15 Republicans, and as you know, it's now 18 Democrats and 17 Republicans due to the recalls that we had this past summer, largely over the passage of the gun legislation, the safety legislation that we thought was imperative that we pass last year. Been unfortunate. So had that not happened, I would not be the majority leader. And frankly, I would much rather not be the majority leader as opposed to having gotten the title under these circumstances. But we are where we are. And I think my friend Jeannie down here, Senator Nicholson, said it well. We've done, I think, very well keeping the contentiousness of it down this year. Senator Carroll, who's our president, second woman president of the Senate, I might say, I think has done a marvelous job, and she and I meet with our minority counterparts, the minority leader and the assistant minority leader, every week to try to make sure that we don't, if we're going to disagree, we're going to understand why we're disagreeing. And what's the old adage, just because you disagree doesn't mean you have to be disagreeable. So we've tried to keep that part of the rhetoric down. I'm going to want to talk to you about the budget and about a bunch of other things, but I just wanted to kind of set the framework, and I think it's been largely pretty positive. With 30 days to go, we got some good things that we've done, I think.
Thank you. Representative Mike Foote.
Good morning. Thank you, and thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Mike Foote. I represent House District 12. That's Louisville, Lafayette, and about a third of Longmont. And I guess I would start off by saying that the way I would describe this session, this is my second session, so I only have to compare it to last year, but compared to last year, I would say it's less flash, but still very good substance. We're really focusing on a lot of the bread and butter issues that everyone cares about: jobs, education, the environment, and of course disaster recovery, particularly here in Boulder County with flood recovery, but I would put fire mitigation, fire recovery in that category as well. 2 minutes goes awfully fast, so I'm sure I won't be able to get into too much of what I've personally done, but I'll just give you a quick summary. First of all, as I said, flood recovery has been a huge priority. Myself, Senator Jones, Representative Singer served on the Bipartisan Flood Disaster Study Committee, which started last October. It's 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and we came up with some good legislation that a lot of the legislation ended up getting passed or is on the way of getting passed. I personally was on 3 bills for flood recovery, and also I've been involved with trying to make sure that the federal government doesn't forget us, and we get as much money as we possibly can from FEMA and from HUD, and the state government as well, to make sure that we can help the counties particularly affected by the flood, Boulder, Weld, and Larimer in particular. Oil and gas has been another priority of mine, and I've worked really hard to make sure we had strong air rules that ended up getting passed about a month ago, as well as just released this year's version of the penalties bill, which will increase penalties on oil and gas operators that don't follow the rules. And finally, I focused on criminal and civil justice, in particular making sure that we do a better job of protecting pregnant women, kids, and the elderly. So I'll be happy to talk about any one of those in more detail and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you. And Representative Casey Becker.
Thank you. I'm Casey Becker. I'm honored to be the representative for House District 13. House District 13 includes areas of Boulder west of Broadway and Martin Acres, Table Mesa, down to El Dorado Springs, Netherland, and then several other counties. I share Gilpin County with Senator Nicholson, Clear Creek County, which is the area of Georgetown, Idaho Springs, Grand County, which is Winter Park, Granby, Grand Lake, and Jackson County, where there's about 1,000 people in a county the size of Rhode Island. It's huge, but it's beautiful up there. So having representative who is part of her district in the Front Range and part on the Western Slope, I think gives me really interesting and valuable perspective, particularly on natural resources and environmental issues. And having a background in that area, that's really where I'm focusing a lot of my time. So I'm the newest member of the State House. I was sworn in November, so I've been there about 5 months. I took the seat when Claire Levy vacated, resigned to take a job at the Colorado Center of Law and Policy. Let's see, but I will be up for election this November along with everyone else. And I'm on the finance committees, which has seen a lot of tax credit bills. There's a bigger budget this year, and so there are people looking to spend it with tax credits. We've seen a lot of those. Mike Foote and I both serve on that committee. And then I'm on the Ag and Natural Resources Committee, and I've particularly been focusing on some of the water bills, and we can talk more about that later.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least is Representative Jonathan Singer.
Well, thank you. I am Jonathan Singer, and with this group of people, I might be the least, and I'd be okay with that, actually. We have an amazing group of Boulder County legislators who really, as Senator Raleigh Heath likes to talk about it, we really do work as a team. It's amazing to see how everybody here has their own issues that really relate to the issues that affect Boulder County, but we're all able to focus on different things to make sure that we cover as much as possible. I represent Longmont, Lyons, Allens Park, and Niwot, or as some people call now, Flood City, and that's been my focus for the last, since September, really. And the good news is things are getting better, but things aren't back to the way they should be. And that's the story of Colorado, is we got hit by an economic hard time and hardship not too long ago, and we're not where we should be in education. We're not where we should be in jobs. We aren't where we should be in healthcare, in every facet of it. We aren't where we should be, and so that's what we're fighting for every day, is making sure that our communities have the tools and resources to build on those opportunities to make a stronger Colorado. I want to thank the League for for being here today and supporting us in getting this message out, and also on 2 bills. Last year I ran a bill on voter pre-registration to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. It's kind of a motor voter bill to get more 16 and 17-year-olds up to date on their voter registration before they're 18, so they don't have to do the extra paperwork. That bill passed. I ran another bill on approval voting to help local elections move forward, and that bill died. So 1 for 2, not too bad, but that gives me a reason to come back next year. Last but not least, I'm focused on a number of issues relating to everything from marijuana to bingo and raffle, and I look forward to talking to you more about those issues.
Yes. Good segue on, not that marijuana should be the major topic, but the taxation on it is kind of interesting. And then that leads to budget discussions. And I have asked Representative Hullinghorst and Senator Heath to address the budget, which is also called the long bill, on what are some of the issues, major issues. This is the first year in a long time we've seen some excess revenue, and how are we going to divvy that all up? And then I may ask you, Representative Singer, to discuss taxation on marijuana. How is that affecting or not affecting the budget? So I'll start with Representative Hullinghorst, and 5 minutes to discuss your points of view from the House on the budgeting and the long bill.
Thank you. Since this bill started in the House, it's been about a week ago, so For my age, my memory may have failed a little bit, but I'm sure that Senator Heath will pick it up since it passed just yesterday in the Senate. This budget is approximately $20 billion. That includes all the intergovernmental spending in the federal funds and other funds that we get. The real essence of our budget is the general fund budget, which we have the opportunity to appropriate through the long bill or the budget bill, and that's around 8 point something, almost $9 billion, which is a higher amount than we have had, as we've said. The budget is really made up of three major buckets where we spend most of our money. Education is the top area almost. Corrections and public safety is the other, and health and human services is the third. We have intended, and it has been a priority for us, to increase funding in education substantially. And that includes, I believe, by the time we get through the conference committee in the budget, $100 million, slightly more than $100 million of higher education, which is historic. We have never put that much additional money into higher education. And we've put significant amount of money into K through 12, actually preschool through 12 education as well. And it's one of my colleague, Senator Heath's major priorities, and you know more about that than I do after it's gone through the Senate. But I'm very pleased with what I believe we're going to be able to put in that budget. It's a set-aside in the budget. We now have to pass the School Finance Act, which actually puts the money in from the long bill, and we have a new bill called the Student Success Act, which is going to add even more dollars to preschool through 12 education. And then we have spent some significant additional money in the area of job creation and workforce development, economic sustainability and economic justice, including tax credit for child care for the poorest of our workers, the working poor, as we refer to that sometimes, to job creation through education and targeting of skills through workforce development, economic gardening for small business, other job incentive programs for small business and businesses that provide for a lot of manufacturing jobs. We call them advanced industries, which includes clean tech and renewable energy and a number of others. So we have worked very hard on those priorities in this budget. It is a balanced budget, and it is a sustainable budget, which is very important. We have put extra money into the reserve, and for what many people call rainy day fund, we increased the reserve to 6.5% this year. There are many who believe it should be 10% based on the disasters that we may face and the economic downturns that will be inevitable. So I'm very satisfied that we've done a responsible job with the budget. It is a moral document from my perspective, and I think we've done what we could for the state.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Senator Heath, how did the long bill get through on the Senate floor, and what are some of the issues there?
Thanks. Yes, as Dickie said, the good news is we have put more money back into higher ed, $100 million, about $450 million in the long bill into K-12. That's the good news. The bad news is we're nowhere near where we were several years ago. And yes, it is a moral budget, but the problem with the budget is we're only dealing with the pot that we have. And the League was wonderful in supporting Proposition 103 that I ran in 2011. And I did get a chance to express my frustrations a little bit, as Senator Jones and Senator Nicholson had to live with this yesterday. But I got into this whole notion of where we are as a state and our values and the fact that we're, in my mind, doing a huge disservice to our young people by basically funding education, one of the lowest levels in the whole country, and higher ed basically last in the whole country. And we made some inroads back at this, but we're frankly going to be basically in the same position, what we've done. And sitting in this room with our school board and having this conversation earlier, it was January or February, I guess, about what we could do and what we're going to try to do. And we do have a couple other bills in addition to the long bill that's going to put more money into education. But the bottom line is we still have some huge issues that we need to deal with, and frankly, the only way to deal with them is to increase the pot. All we're doing is moving things around right now, and I think we're all proud of how we did that. I think we did a magnificent job. Just so you know, the vote in the Senate yesterday was 26-9. And so that meant of the 17 Republicans, 8 voted for the bill, which was, I think showed what I alluded to earlier, that we have come a long way in this session, and we have come together on a number of issues. And one of the things, frankly, that caused that is the fact that we put roughly $20 million into supporting, I'll call it an air fleet, if you will, but basically the ability to have our own aircraft available to fight fires. And even though we've got a lot of snow out right now, southern Colorado has one fire already, so southern Colorado is very dry. So we felt very strongly, and the Senate president did that. Obviously, a Democrat, with Representative Steve King, who is from Grand Junction, and who's tried to get this done for the last 3 years, and obviously the two parties came together to get this done, and that vote, I think, was pretty much, I think, unanimous on the floor of the Senate yesterday. So again, we came together on that. Came together on a number of other issues. I must say, Representative Hollinghorst-Dickey, they took the money for advanced industries out of that bill. Yes, and we're going to have to go to conference committee, and we will get it back in, but for some reason or other, the one area that we have not been able to come together on is this whole notion of economic development. And in my mind, you can't separate jobs and education. They go one together. You can't talk about an educated or a skilled workforce without obviously educating the workers, and you can't talk about basically growing industry, growing jobs, without basically having the access to capital. And one of the biggest issues that we have in this state is we just don't have a lot of venture capital available. So the Advanced Industries Bill basically provided capital for startups, that initial capital investment for someone who has a good idea but doesn't have access to capital, and to compete for those dollars, and if awarded them, give them a little head start, and some of the things we're really trying to do. So it was a good process, and I think we did well with it yesterday. All of the leadership in the Senate voted for it, which I think is a good thing. But we have a conference committee we still need to do some work on, and we've still got the whole issue of education, which I know you're going to let me talk about going forward to deal with. So I'm with Dickie. I think it was a good process, and we fulfilled our obligation to balance the budget. It's never easy, but I think we did it. But again, we're only operating with a small amount of the dollars.
Okay. Dealing with some of the issues, particularly in natural disasters, which are going to be asking for monies out of the budget, I'd like to have the legislators that were dealing with bills this session on natural disasters sort of start. And maybe, Senator Jones, you want to start in 3 minutes on some of the bills and issues, and then Representative Foote and Representative Singer can come in also with 3 minutes on other issues and bills and tag along that way, okay? Senator Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so used to saying that in the legislature, it's just automatically coming out of my mouth. We always say thank you,
Glad you know the procedures
Madam
now.
Chair, and that kind of thing. So, I represent Longmont, all of Longmont, Louisville, Lafayette, and the Boulder County side of Erie. So, all those areas were flood affected last September, and I must say, I went up to Longmont from Louisville on Friday. That water started pouring Wednesday, if you remember. Senator Heath and I returned from the West Slope from some transportation hearings on Thursday, and we're lucky to get in. And I got up to Longmont on Friday, and nothing like seeing the evacuees coming in out of Alliance to make the point of how this affects people. Our former Senator Schaefer's house was flooded, for instance. It's hit a lot of people, and it's a real issue. And I think one of the things that those of us on the Flood Disaster Study Committee, Representative Singer, Foote, myself, have been working on is reminding people this isn't over. This is a long-term recovery. And so in that vein, we have been trying to find money to help with that and do other things as well. But as you may know, FEMA reimburses, but not everything, and same thing with the Federal Highway Administration. And the locals have a share to pay, and we're trying to pay half of that, essentially. And so I spoke a little bit earlier about the bill that allows counties to help use their general fund for up to 4 years that I sponsored with Representative Foote in the House and two Republicans. It's out of a bipartisan commission. Representative Singer's right. 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and we work together. There's only been one bill that we've had a disagreement on because this issue, water molecules don't care about your party affiliation. And we all know that. The other bill I'm running with Representative Young up in Greeley is a bill to allow $17 million to be spent for wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants. Longmont's lost 2/3 of its water in the flood from Button Rock Reservoir. This pipe flows through Lyons. And they were lucky not to lose their last third, quite frankly. That pipe was exposed on the Little Thompson River. And then their sewage treatment plant, they're still rerouting their sewage around instead of their main pipe, another pipe. And that's the kind of thing we need to help fix, obviously. The most vivid example is out of my district in Lyons, where the river was on the wrong side of the sewage treatment plant or the wastewater plant, which is a bad thing, you might think. So that's another thing we're doing, but there are a number of bills. We all just kind of take our turn, get on a bill and run the thing, and it's been going very well, and I'm proud to be part of getting people back on their feet.
Okay, Representative Foote, the bills and some of your perspective on the disaster relief stuff.
Sure, thank you. And I guess before I get too far, I want to make sure that everyone knows that Senator Nicholson also is on the Flood Disaster Committee.
I was going to ask her because of the wildfire and other things.
And I apologize for not mentioning that at the beginning, but what made that come to my mind most vividly is the fact that the first bill that I ran was a bill that Senator Nicholson ran in the Senate as well, and that was House Bill 1004. That dealt with a couple of things. First was a slight reorganization of the emergency management system here in Colorado. We always want to make sure we're the most efficient as we can be, and it was leading to the point where there was, in some cases, 2 emergency plans. And I think anyone that's in emergency planning or management will tell you the only thing worse than not having a plan at all is having 2 plans. And so we wanted to address that. We moved some things around in order to address that and made the process even better. I think it worked well this last time, but we always want to do lessons learned, and that's one of the aspects of it. The other part of that bill was gave the governor the ability to declare a state of emergency for the purposes of individual financial aid. And it was kind of a weird situation that we saw this year, but the federal government generally declares a federal disaster, and then federal individual aid can flow upon that and other things as well. But they, for whatever reason, didn't declare a disaster in certain counties, and Gilpin and Washington counties here in Colorado were 2. And it led to an odd situation where on one side of the river, if you lived on the Gilpin County side of the river, obviously your house was flooded, but you weren't eligible for federal individual aid as a result of the fact that there was not a federal disaster area declared in Gilpin County. But go south of the river into Jeffco. Jeffco was a disaster area, so Jeffco homeowners were eligible for the aid. So that was just not a very good situation overall, and we wanted to make sure that from the state standpoint, we could make sure that individual aid could go to those homeowners in Gilpin County or Washington County or anywhere else if there is a disaster. It just didn't seem right that one side of the river could get it and the other side couldn't. So that was part of House Bill 1004. I also ran Senate Bill 138 in the House, which extended civil immunity to volunteers in emergencies. We wanted to make sure that people could go out and lend a hand to their neighbors and to their friends and not have any kind of concern that they were going to get sued if something went wrong, if there was some kind of negligence attached. So wanted to make sure that we did that as well. I also feel very privileged to have served on the Flood Disaster Study Committee. It's really an example of what we can do when we get together and we put politics aside and we work on behalf of the state. Everybody on that committee had the same goal, and we came up with some good legislation. And I think that we will be, we are helping the people of the state with the legislation. Of course, as a state, we can't come up with the over $1 billion in unmet need, and we're hoping that the federal government can help with that. But we're doing what we can, so I'm really glad that I've been able to do it.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overlook you, Senator Nicholson, but please contribute, from your point of view, particularly with the wildfires. I mean, a lot of us down here were all flooded, so we were concentrating on that. So what's happening from the wildfire perspective, and then I'll do Representative Singer. Thank you.
Before I comment on the wildfires, I wanted just to mention that perhaps I was a little too quiet, that I wasn't noticed on the flood committee. But I did carry a number of bills that came from the House that Representative Foote and Representative Singer are going to talk about, so I won't mention those. But also, I'm starting in the Senate 2 pieces of legislation that came from the Flood Disaster Study Committee. One is for stream restoration, and the other is for mitigating phreatophytes, a particular kind of noxious weed that we're worried about spreading beyond where we know it to be prior to the flood. And I'm assuming that those will go well. They aren't through the process in the Senate yet and over to the House, but I think they are another aspect of the whole issue of dealing with the flood. It's the immediate reaction that we need to have to help save lives and property, but it's also all the long-term impacts that we need to deal with.
Okay. Thank you. And Representative Singer, you got flooded.
Well, and it came. When it came, it came. When it rained, it poured. I have to say I was lucky. I live on a 3rd-floor apartment, and the people on the 1st floor were not able to come back for about 3 months. And so when I say it hits close to home, it really hits close to home for me. You had people who have very little means in the first place because they're renters and not homeowners. And when something is damaged or destroyed like that, the lease can be nullified, and that's to benefit both sides. That's to benefit both the homeowners or the leaseholders as well as the lessors and the lessees. But that meant that there were a lot of homeless people, and in my community we had literally thousands of homeless people, and hundreds are still homeless. And so it's what takes up most of my waking hours and all my sleeping hours as well. I have to say, though, I'm proud that the House just yesterday passed House Bill 1. Finally, it's the 90th day of the session or so. We're 90 days into it, but House Bill 1 finally passed the House. And this is a bill to make sure that if your home was destroyed in a natural disaster, whether it be fire, flood, or tornado, that you don't owe property taxes on that home. And this came straight out of a town hall meeting that Senator Heath and I were at Lifebridge Christian Church shortly after the flood, and we had a constituent who had the courage to raise his hand and say, I'm homeless, I don't have riverfront property, it's just river property now, and am I going to owe taxes on that? And both Senator Heath and I ran out of the room, called our treasurer and assessor at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and they said, yeah, state law basically requires that they owe at least some taxes on that property because they had it for some point during the year, and it was fine. Well, that seemed like the wrong thing to do. And so what we did is we worked on passing a bill to make sure that if the property tax assessor can't find your home, he can't tax you. And it turns out in legalese that takes about 7 or 8 pages, and I want to, I'm really appreciative of everybody that rolled up their sleeves, the county treasurers and assessors, people like Jerry Roberts and Bob Hullinghorst here in Boulder, along with about 63 other treasurers and assessors that all had different opinions of how best to do this, put their heads together and put their personal technical differences aside to make sure that we were able to do something that would help those that were most affected. And that doesn't change things for people that lost part of their home, doesn't change things for people that suffered significant losses that didn't include a destroyed home, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a building block. And the last thing I'll say is the most important thing I think we could have done as a group, as a committee, is we actually got out of the Capitol almost on day one as the Flood Disaster Committee and went out to those affected areas. And that's I think, what really made the difference and gave us that sense of purpose.
Okay, thank you. I want to kind of move to another area, but it is related to some of the disaster, but it's dealing with our natural resources and some of the water issues that the state is facing. And initially, I'm going to have Representative Becker start with maybe 3 to 5 minutes on what bills you've been dealing with in agriculture, natural resources, dealing with our natural resources in the state, and then who should I get from the Senate? Senator Jones, right? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question. So one of the big pushes in the last year throughout the state has been at what are called the basin roundtables. Each of the basins in Colorado has assembled a group of folks to work on a statewide water plan. And this is the first time it's been done. A draft is due at the end of 2014. And this is an effort that Governor Hickenlooper began. And it's a really important effort because the prediction is that we're short about 500,000 acre feet by about 2040. And where's that water going to come from, and how are we going to plan for that? And what are the priorities that we have in really addressing our water needs? So that's something that we're going to be dealing with in the coming year. In the meantime, we do have various other natural resources bills that we've been working on. And as you've probably heard the saying go, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. Because, so much of obviously what we depend on in this state in terms of economic development, in terms of healthy rivers and healthy forests and healthy public lands, depends on water. So I am continuing to work on a bill that I think is really important regarding water, Senate Bill 23. It was run by Gail Schwartz in the Senate. She's been working on it for a long time. And it basically, in Colorado, there's 85% of our water supply is used by agriculture, with the rest pretty much being used by municipalities, and very little, in my opinion, staying in the streams. And there's not an incentive really for ag to be more efficient with its water. We have a prior appropriation system, which means first in time, first in right. Those who use it first get to use it. You have to put it to beneficial use, but that doesn't mean you have to use it efficiently. And ag users, if they conserve their water, they lose the portion that they're not using. And they don't want to lose their water rights. They have value. They're expensive. They don't want to give that up. So we've been working on a bill that basically said, agricultural users, if you make improvements to your system, you line your ditch, you pipe your ditch, those sort of things, any water that's saved, you don't lose, but it just has to stay in the stream for that portion that you're from the historic diversion point to the historic return point. And Senator Schwartz did an amazing job bringing together all stakeholders. But the idea is just sort of an anathema to many ag users, and we are still trying to get this passed and don't have all the ag support that we'd like. But another bill, maybe Senator Jones will talk about it, is Senate Bill 103. Do you want to talk about the water efficiency bill? I'll let you talk about that one. We have a couple more coming up that have to do with the due diligence it takes to perfect a water right. Really, you put water in one of these bills and you have about a couple hundred different water users saying, wait, it changes Colorado water law, and each of these is really big stakeholder meetings and tend to be controversial. Another one that we're going to be seeing shortly is there's huge amounts of groundwater in the South Platte Basin that are flooding basements, and all the groundwater users are saying, a lot of folks are saying, give us relief. You're requiring us to pump a lot of water, refill the alluvial aquifer, the rivers, with more groundwater. We don't need to be doing this because there's so much groundwater. It's flooding everywhere. And then you have other users saying, you have to keep it that way. You change anything in water here and it affects everywhere around it. So they're complex issues, probably hard to follow, but we continue to be working on efforts to use water more efficiently, make sure that it's in the right place at the right time and not in the wrong place. And there's just a lot of, in probably every area that the legislature deals with, a lot of pushback, because this is a system that's been in place for well over 100 years, and change comes hard. So we continue to work on these issues.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Jones, a lot of the energy, water issues, and Senate Bill 103.
Right. So the challenge we face in Colorado, we're projecting to double our population by 2050. And that's why Governor Hickenlooper's put together this group to do a state water plan, trying to figure this out. And it's like herding wet cats in this case. It is a very, very hard thing to do. There's a lot of money involved, a lot of livelihoods involved, a lot at stake, and so people are really focused on that. And we're trying to avoid what's happened recently in the so-called ag dry-up, where you dry up farmland and it becomes not very worthwhile. And I think it's part of the reason we have dust bowls down in southeast Colorado now. The bill that Representative Becker mentioned has to do with indoor water fixtures, sprinklers, their shower heads, toilets, that kind of thing, making them more efficient. So what you can buy in a store, when I was in the legislature before, they dropped them tanks from 5 to 3.5 gallons. You might remember that a long time ago. Then they've gone to 1.8. Now they're going about 1.3, and that's what it takes to do what you need to do. We have a low flow fixture like that, and it works great. So half of the water we get as well is for watering our lawns. That's the other challenge we have in the water arena. There isn't necessarily a bill this year, but conservation among people who provide water is a huge thing. And when you think about it, with the state water plan, shouldn't you start there first? Before you build dams, before you dewater some agricultural property. So that's what we're doing with that bill. On the natural resource front, I do work on electric vehicles. This year we did a bill. I was a Senate sponsor of a bill that is going to be putting out more charging stations. If you have a car, you have to have a gas station. If you have an electric car, you better have an electric station, right? And so we're trying to get those, especially along the Front Range, so that people can charge up where they need to. And then the third thing relating with natural resources that I work with Representative Foote on quite a bit of oil and gas, and I'm sure he'll probably talk about the fines bill he's worked so hard on. But last year, Representative Singer and I did a bill asking the Department of Natural Resources, Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to look at what things should they look for, particularly when they go out and inspect a well. This came from a well that was leaking up in Longmont, the Ryder well near middle school, 80 times the benzene level in the groundwater. And we were saying, well, why can't your inspectors find it when the person was trying to develop the property hired some consultants who could find it? And they did some good work, and they're actually focusing their inspections more on when they put the pipes under the ground in these units, because that's where they tend to have problems. So there's an increment of gain there. We also put more inspectors in the field, 11 more as a team last year. There were 16 inspectors for the whole state, 50,000 wells. That's once every 3 years. I think we're now down to 1.1 well every 2.5 years because there are more and more wells. But we need more inspectors on the ground, but we push just about every angle we can on this issue because we think it should be done responsibly. And when you plop an industrial use in somebody's backyard, you better not adversely affect them, their health, even their property value of their homes, which there's more and more study coming out on. So that's another thing I work on is the oil and gas, plus many other environmental issues. I worked on a bill this year that's going to the governor that allows them to reintroduce ferrets, believe it or not, in open space lands. You better have a lot of property to do that. There's one place we know of that Fort Collins owns north of Fort Collins where they think they're going to do this. But I just think, environmental stuff, natural resource stuff is my passion. It's a real interest. And it was fun to be able, and I used to work for an open space agency, so it was fun to help my old friends to reintroduce the most endangered mammal in North America up there. And so those are the kinds of things I work on. And happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. On following up on oil and gas, Representative Foote, would you, in 3 minutes, kind of talk about your fines bill and what it would do? And it's something, obviously, the League is very interested in, and it has supported in the past. Yeah.
And thank you for that, and happy to do it. Just a very quick background. Last year, many of us were looking at the current regime for oil and gas drilling around the state, and one thing that really popped out was the fact that our fines regime, or penalties regime, just to say it a little broader, is pretty insufficient. We, right now, under current law, if an operator violates a rule, they can only be fined up to $1,000 per violation per day, with a cap of $10,000. And that can be exceeded if it's a really, really bad violation, in other words. But it was just way insufficient. That was put into place in 1955 and hadn't been changed since then, other than in 1994, the $10,000 cap being put in. So obviously, when you look at other states, it was worse than most other states. Many other states have somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $12,500 per violation per day. And for air violations, our own state has $15,000 per violation per day. And so the first part, we ran the fines bill last year. It didn't succeed for a variety of reasons, and it would probably take a lot longer than 3 minutes to discuss that. But we're bringing it back this year and changing it in some ways. But the main parts of the fines bill are, number one, it takes it up to a $15,000 per violation per day maximum and gets rid of the cap. So that's going to be probably the thing that makes the headlines, but and it's an important part of the bill. Number two, what we're doing is I call it kind of the bookends concept. And what we found before was some operators, and again I'm talking about the irresponsible ones or the ones that are breaking the rules, they would violate the rules for 30 days, for example, and then over the course of the negotiation, they would end up negotiating that down to 10 days. So they'd only pay for 10 days worth of violations instead of 30. So the bookend says, no, you can't do that. If you're going to violate the rules for 30 days, you got to pay for 30 days. And then the third aspect of it is for those that show a pattern of violations, repeat violators, as well as those that show gross negligence or knowing and willful misconduct, there can be license implications. So not only could they would be subject to a fine, but also they could have their license suspended or taken away to drill. So that's a big deal for those operators. And then finally, there's an added transparency component as well, where it'll be more understandable for folks to take a look at why the fines were levied in a certain way. And I think that over the course of time with legislators and the public taking a look at these things, we can really see if we think that it's being used appropriately. And they have to report to the legislature once a year what they're doing for fines, and particularly when you add the bookends part of it, it'll be a lot more understandable as to why did they fine $10,000 for this violation and just $1,000 for that violation and so forth. So that's really it in a nutshell about what we're trying to pass this year.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to move on to health care bills, and I'm going to start with Senator Nicholson in the Senate and some of the health care bills that have been up and some of the issues you see in that area, and then I'll have Representative Singer cover it on the House side. Okay, Senator Nicholson.
Thank you. I think the main theme that we've seen in the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate has been to look at legislation that would allow more transparency in the cost of health care. The other issue that has come up most recently is how well is the health exchange doing in enrolling people in health insurance coverage, and is this an efficient model that will be sustainable beyond the federal funding? Some members of the committee and other members of the Senate who are not on the committee were concerned about that and wanted an audit for the health exchange. Myself and some of the other members felt that that was unnecessary because the health exchange has had 4 audits already, and they came out looking very good from those audits. One concern was raised that was immediately corrected, and they have provided a lot of reports and transparency in the process all along through the Health Exchange Committee that many of us serve on. So from our perspective, they're actually doing a good job and certainly doing a better job than the federal model in getting people enrolled and having a very efficient system that charges very little in terms of administrative costs. So we suspect that there could have been some effort to slow that process down rather than to truly look at whether there were some problems, because we wanted to be sure that as many people as possible could be enrolled by the deadline, and indeed they were able to reach that goal, and we think it's a pretty efficient system. In addition to that, we've had a number of bills that I think improve the healthcare system, but are probably not on the front page of the newspapers. One is a bill that I'm carrying that provides greater assurance in the quality of care that you receive from paramedics or EMTs in the ambulance or on the ski slope, wherever they are practicing and providing care to us. And there are several of those that have gone through, one about making sure that we have adequate funding for breast and cervical cancer, et cetera. So it's been kind of a mixture of some kind of grand issues and some issues that are good, but probably not front page kind of issues.
They're all important, though. Representative Singer.
Thank you. In terms of healthcare, I actually, in the House, I guess we care so much about healthcare, we have 2 healthcare committees. We have the Public Health and Human Services Committee, which typically looks at Medicaid and some of the public subsidies that we provide for indigent individuals, and then we also, and children. And then we also have the Health Insurance and Environment Committee, which looks at the private insurance market and making sure that that market is regulated in a way that's cheap and affordable for consumers. I ran one bill this year with Senator Irene Aguilar, who is an MD physician, and this was simply a Medicaid efficiency bill. Since healthcare reform came in last year, Colorado had the option of expanding Medicaid to adults without children up to 133% of the federal poverty level, or about someone who would make the equivalent of a little less than $20,000 a year. And so what we did with that Medicaid streamlining is we had about 40 different types of Medicaid in Colorado, because there were a lot of ifs, ands, or buts where we said, well, we'll cover you if you're over 18 and you've got this disability, or we'll cover you if you're over 18, have this disability, and fall in this income level or that bracket. Well, a lot of those got wiped out when we expanded the Medicaid eligibility based on the federal poverty level. So instead of leaving those vestigial elements, we did a legal appendectomy, basically. And basically now we have 4 major categories, which makes it easier and more efficient for our eligibility technicians that are processing the paperwork to make sure that people get the care they need quickly. Some of the other things that we've done is, the healthcare exchange, I believe in Colorado, is not the story of the healthcare exchange federally. We had a great system set up. It was set up by Democrats and Republicans. It was sponsored by the former House Majority Leader Amy Stevens, who's a Colorado Springs Republican, who understood doing it the Colorado way was more important than fighting the President of the United States. So we do have a more efficient system. And we've had, I think, over 270,000 people signed up on that. And so it's something that has been incredibly helpful, and we're putting in good efficiency mechanisms, including regional care collaboratives and accountable care collaboratives, to make sure that we reduce those costs by incentivizing healthcare providers that make sure that hospital readmissions are lowered, that high-cost imaging is used judiciously, and that well-child checkups happen on a regular basis so kids aren't coming in for things that doctors can catch sooner. That's really just the tip of the iceberg, so you can see why we have two committees in the House to handle these things.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to education and some of the funding for that. And Senator Heath, would you please talk about the money in the budget? I know the school finance bill is still on its way through, and then I'll have Representative Hullinghorst handle questions for the House side on what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, just as an aside, are we going to get a chance just to talk about the fiscal policy of the state? Because I think that...
You want to handle that? Because that's one of my questions. What's going to happen in the state with Tabor?
we
Which
can
is
either
a
deal with that.
perpetual lead question,
we can either
too.
deal with that up front so everybody can understand the education issues.
Start with Tabor and some of those issues, and then we'll move on.
Let me just start with that. We've got just one of the craziest situations, certainly in the country, and it all because we're the only state in the country that has the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which is Tabor, which was passed in 1992. And we also have the Gallagher Amendment, which basically dictates how much local residential tax paid, real estate tax, as opposed to commercial. So all of that has come together just to create an absolute nightmare for us. And it also, in Tabor, basically, I think, as you know, basically says that the legislature cannot raise taxes, we can only lower taxes. So that's the situation we find ourselves. And we now currently have a federal lawsuit in which David Skaggs, whom I know most of you recognize his name, represented us quite ably as our U.S. representative, and also was a state legislator, is in the middle of that lawsuit, and in fact has argued that case, which basically says this. There's a constitutional mandate for representative government, and basically what this lawsuit says very simply is the Tabor takes away representative government because the most basic thing that a legislature does is basically deal with the finances of the state, i.e. The ability to raise and lower taxes. So that lawsuit has passed two now challenges and is moving forward. Both of those challenges were to dismiss it, and in both cases that the court ruled that this was a judicial issue and a reasonable issue, and as a result is going forward. But that's a long way off. So where do we find ourselves? Well, we find ourselves with the Tabor limit in effect. And we could find ourselves, and most likely will find ourselves, in a couple of years refunding money back to all of us again at a time, and this gets back to the education, at a time where we're grossly underfunding education. And to put this in perspective, in the first year that I was in the legislature, I chaired the Long-Term Fiscal Policy Commission and looked at where we would be in the state going forward. And we commissioned, at that time, DU. Those folks are now at CSU, and I've got 1 minute to try to do this. And basically, they said, if we do nothing, if we just continue the current system, in a relatively short period of time, the state government's only going to be able to fund three things. One, a K-12, not higher ed at all, corrections, and Medicaid. And we will have no other money for anything else unless we do something with the tax structure. And that's where we find ourselves. And so, and Tabor obviously puts a limit that we can only spend so much as a state government, and we are rapidly approaching that limit. And in 2 years, we're going to find ourselves refunding money at the same time that we have all of these needs, whether it's mental health, whether it's higher education, you go on and name it. So that's the anomaly we're going to have, and that affects education. So I think we need to understand that before we talk about where we are with K-12 and higher ed. So
Okay.
thanks for letting me do that.
How about 2 minutes on the state school finance bill?
Okay, 2 minutes in the state school finance bill. One of the things when we had the downturn is the legislature asked for a ruling. We all were involved in passing Amendment 23, and my guess is most of us here in this room voted for that, which basically said we're going to fund K-12 at growth plus inflation, at that point plus 1%. The 1% has since gone away. So we did that, and we asked, because of the dire straits we were in, we asked what that meant. And we got a definition meant that that only applied, the growth plus inflation plus 1% only applied to the base. And the base did not include a number of factors which I don't have time to get into. So we have been doing that. And we have not been funding the factors, and that's where you read this thing called the negative factor, which means that had we had to fund everything, which we all thought we were going to fund, we're over $1 billion short towards that. So you read a lot recently about having the legislature fund the negative factor. I might tell you that there is nothing required legally for us to fund the negative factor. The ruling was we didn't have to fund it, no money was put aside for it, so this $1 billion that's hanging out there, there's no legal requirement on the legislature to fund that. But part of what we're going to do is basically this time in the agreement that was just reached is actually put $110 million towards that, and that's in the, what do we call it, the Student Success Act. So we've got the Student Success Act and the School Finance Act both running together, and together the Student Success Act will put over roughly $200 million into the schools, and then the School Finance Act is the one that will fund what we have to do. So anyway, it's not simple, but we're coming. We're getting there.
Okay, Representative Hullinghorst, the School Finance Act.
Yes, and I thank Representative Heath because he's such a wonderful spokesperson.
Keep demoting me or promoting me.
Did I say representative
Yes,
again? I really apologize.
That's all right. That's all right. I should be honored, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on which house you're from, but anyway. Senator Heath, Majority Leader Heath, I really appreciate all of his knowledge on this and his tremendous dedication to education in the state of Colorado and all of the work he's done on that. And you can hear his passion when he talks about this. And we really are, generally speaking, in a mess. About 45% of our budget, and that we'll see what that is this year after they get the pie charts done and after the budget is finalized, but it'll be somewhere around there, goes to education, K through 12 and higher. And when we have a problem funding that and have to cut, and which we have had to do since the Great Recession up to this year, that we take a lot of that out of higher education to the extent that now higher education is funded the lowest in the country. And for instance, CU gets about 5% of its operating budget from the state of Colorado, where it used to be a very large portion of that. And they have to find other ways to do that by increasing tuition to a large extent, which now this year we hope with the higher education bill, Senate Bill 1, that at least we can get some more money, $100 million, and tuition rates are capped at 6%. So that's one thing. Then the School Finance Act and the Student Success Act will combine, I believe, because it isn't finalized yet, to provide around $400 extra per student which turns out to be between $6,000 and $7,000 per student total. But still, that is, say 48th, 49th, 50th in the country in the amount of money that we put per student into public education. We've done some good things in the School Finance Act and the School and the Student Success Act to increase funding for preschool and full-day kindergarten, which I think many of us who study the statistics know is one of the most important things to do for student success and making sure that we lessen the graduation gap for students in the state of Colorado. We also are putting some more money into English language learning, which is a very important part of providing assistance to students in public schools right now. I think everybody's fairly happy with what we are able to do. The schools want a lot more assigned to the negative factor. If we do that, and we've all taken a good look at doing absolutely what we thought we could, we are in danger of then having to cut education again in 2 years, and none of us want to have to go through that again. So we have tried to make what we do sustainable with regard to the budget, and that's what the Finance Act will reflect.
Okay. And then I'd like you to just segue over. Last year was a big year on some election reforms, and there have been a number of bills this year to address some of those issues, plus some additional things. And I know that you're sponsoring several of them, Representative Hullinghorst. Could you give us, in about 3 minutes, some of the issues that you faced in the elections area and the bills, et cetera?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the State League of Women Voters and all of you for participating in that process and being a very strong supporter of election reform in the state of Colorado, and it has been a great help. You all know what you're talking about, and it's great to hear from people like you. In any case, the bill that I prime-sponsored last year, House Bill 1303, provided for modernization of our election code and reform of elections to make it as easy as possible for people in the state of Colorado to vote and to assure that their vote would not be jeopardized, their right to vote would not be jeopardized as much as we possibly could. Given all of the areas in the last major election where we felt voter suppression happened or was at least there as a danger, not so much in this state, but in many other places across the country. So 1303 was designed to do that, and the primary policy changes relative to that were the all-mail ballot, so that everyone got a ballot in the mail, and same-day registration and voting. And we did it deliberately last year so that it could be tested by our county clerks and recorders and our voters in the 2013 election. And we found that test really to be very encouraging, and the election process was very successful. The participation in the municipal elections increased by about 40%. And that is a huge goal for all of us, to increase participation in voting. It's one of the most important rights that we all have. So I'm carrying 2 bills this year from the Senate, they've passed the Senate already, that help make that better. The first one is basically all of the information we got from the county clerks as to what we learned and how we can make that work better for the Uniform Election Code. That's Senate Bill 161, I believe, and that will be heard in State Affairs on Monday. And that does a lot of things that just helps with regard to the affidavits for the clerks to use for registration. It deals with the National Change of Address System. A lot of technical improvements to what was 1303 last year, which is exactly what we wanted to do this year, to make sure that system is working just the very best it can in this next general election in 2014. And then the other one, which will take a whole lot longer for me to explain than I have time for, because I see this, is dealing with the recall election reform. That's the recall provision was in a 1915 constitutional amendment and clearly doesn't relate to modern elections. So we're doing the best we can without having to go do another constitutional referendum to make some changes that we believe we can do under the statutes that will clarify and make that system work better for the voter and for the county clerks if, unfortunately, we have to deal with other recalls in the state of Colorado.
Okay, thank you. That was really a good synopsis. We're sort of winding down. I want to start with our final 2 minutes per representative and senator. And what's happening in the last 30 days of the session and any specific bills that you're still looking forward to? Because I know a number of you have already had bills signed by the governor that you've already had passed. And so what's going on? And we're going to start at with Representative Singer, please.
All right. So the last 30 days of the session are if we thought it was busy for the first first part of it, for the first 90, the last 30 are going to be about as busy as the first 90, I think. The bills that I'm going to be working on in the last little bit of this are going to be related to some of the Senate bills that I'm carrying that haven't come over yet from the Senate. And so I'm just going to talk about two bills because I probably don't have much more time than that. But the first bill is one that I've been working on for the last 3 years. It's died the last 2 times. It's on the topic of wage theft. And it's called the Wage Protection Act. And the idea behind this bill is that we need to stop dishonest employers who don't pay the wages that they've promised. And we just saw this in New York. Mario Batali, one of the Iron Chefs, had to pay a $5 million settlement to his wait staff because he was skimming their tips. These aren't people that have a whole lot of money in the first place. And so we need to do everything we can to make sure that they're protected and that we put honest employers on an even playing field. The second bill that I'm working on right now is related to making sure that police officers that get PTSD in the line of duty get workers' compensation, and if ultimately they end up committing suicide as a result of their PTSD, that they actually get death benefits or their family gets death benefits from those things. It's like any other workplace injury, except for the fact that it's more common in law enforcement. A police officer is more likely to take their own life than to be shot and killed by a felon in the line of duty. So it's our job to do the right thing for those folks. These two bills aren't going to be easy to pass. I don't know if we're going to get either of these done this year. But what I tell my constituents and what I tell everybody, whether it's flood or fire or wage theft or post-traumatic stress disorder, when you're fighting, you're winning. And I won't stop until we get these issues taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Representative Casey Becker.
I'm going to take a little bit of a longer-term view instead of the next 30 days. There's something that I want to work on in the long term, and there was a study that came out this past week that said in terms of overall tax burden to individuals in the various states, Colorado ranks 32nd. And so it makes it sound like we're very much in the middle. But when you look at that, the states that have the lowest tax burden are those that have very high degree of natural resources and tax those natural resources producers at a very high rate. So Alaska, Wyoming, South Dakota, the ones that ranked as the lowest tax burden, were actually very high tax burden on the corporations that benefit from natural resource use. And Colorado is not that state. Our severance tax on oil and gas is between 3% and 5%. It's a scale one of the very lowest in the country. And I see that as a major loss of revenue that sort of makes up for the reason that some of these other states are have very low individual tax burdens. And so that's something I'm beginning to look into. And, it's been approached in the past. There was a ballot measure several years ago that did terribly. And I want to tackle that and, partner going forward with others who are interested in that issue.
Thank you. And Representative Mike Foote.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for having us and taking the time this morning. I'll just mention a couple of things. Of course, from the beginning all the way till the end, I think one of our main priorities should be flood recovery and more broadly, disaster recovery, mitigation, and preparation. And so I know that there's still some flood recovery bills in particular in the process. Senator Nicholson mentioned one about more money for streams and making sure that we can be prepared, particularly for the spring runoff, which is, it very well could be an issue. I know that many counties have been preparing for that, and folks have been preparing for it, not just this year, but throughout. So we'll continue to work on those up until the very last day, I would suspect, and I know that I'll be involved in those efforts. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet this morning, and I won't talk too much about it, just because I have a minute, but is US 36 and the High Performance Transportation Enterprise. And I know that Senator Jones will talk about this because he's really been taking the lead in the Senate on some things that we'll do, but we need to address the process by which we arrived here with the lane, the additional lane on US 36. The process was not anywhere close to ideal. It wasn't transparent. The public didn't have a say. There's still lots of questions that we all have, and not to mention members of the public, about exactly the benefits or the drawbacks of this deal. And the state is looking at doing it on other roads, particularly I-25 and I-70. And while it probably is too late for US 36, unfortunately, because, again, we didn't really know what they were doing as far as signing the contract and so forth, it may be a benefit for the rest of the state. So I know that I'll be working on that throughout the rest of the time, as well as Senator Jones and others, and we'll see what we can get.
Thank you. Senator Raleigh Heath.
Thanks. And let me just make a quick personal comment. Representative Singer alluded to this. I hope you would agree with me. The cumulative knowledge of these folks and serving at this stage of my life with people like this, I mean, is just a real highlight. And this is an incredible delegation. Leaders, and we fall back on so many other shoulders. I'll just mention Dorothy Rupert, Senator Ron Stewart, some just wonderful people who have represented this county, and certainly these folks up here sharing this with me, I think are just a continuation of that. So it's a pleasure, and I know we all feel that way. Let me just also follow up with Casey. I ran for governor in 2002, as you know, and got beat pretty badly, but largely because I'm really concerned about the future of the state, what Tabor has done, and all of those issues. Severance tax is clearly one of those. We voted on severance tax back a ways and defeated it. For the life of me, I can't understand why. And a lot of you helped with referendum C and D, which we passed. We're going to need to do something like that again in 2 years. So I'm going to be probably in front of you. That will be my last year in this role in 2016, but I think we're going to need to have something on the ballot that at least allows the state to retain the money that we have and are not refunding $25 to each of us, and rather than using it for a purpose. Also on recalls, one of the few, if only the only state, even though we're going to do something, as Representative Hollinghorst talked about with the legislation itself on the election, it doesn't change the fact that we can recall anybody. If you don't happen to like bald-headed guys, there are a couple of us up here that would be gone. But really, that's all you need to do with the recall. You need no reason whatsoever, and you can put people through a disaster. We need to do something with that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Dickie Lee Hollinghorst.
Thank you, and I wanted to say thank you, Madam Chair, too. It really does just, and what's nice about that is that we say Madam quite often in terms of chair. We actually, I might mention that, 41% of the Colorado State Legislature folks are women.
Yes.
And that is the highest in the nation. Now, it should be 50, but we're moving that way. We're moving that direction if they reflect. I, too, am very proud to serve with all of my colleagues here, and I especially want to give a shout out to Representative Becker, who came in just a few months ago and has just really contributed a tremendous amount and picked up the ball and just rolled with it very, very well, which is no huge surprise, but it really is nice to have her with us as a new member of our delegation. We have 30 days left to go on the calendar. By Constitution, we have to do our work in 120 days every year. So that will be my major job as we move forward, is to make sure, and my colleague, Senator Heath, is to make sure we organize the work of the House and the Senate so that we can do sine die on May 7th. And we have some fairly important work left to do. We are just beginning our work on telecommunications reform, and there are several major bills running through that we will work on relative to that. As I said, elections, we still have to finish up. We obviously have to finish the School Finance Act and our funding for education, which will take some of our time over the next few days, quite a bit of our time. And I'll just remember one more thing let you know about one more thing that I'm working on that I think is very important and relates to all of our constituents who are very concerned about this. I am still working to reach some resolution with a number of stakeholders on a piece of legislation that would provide clarity and more local control for regulation of oil and gas. We have several titles on the ballot this year that would attempt to do that. I hate to have to do that through constitutional amendments and reform on the ballot. I think it would be far better if we could do it at the state legislature. So stay tuned. We're working on it. Whether we will actually get something together, I'm not sure this year, but I continue to work on that issue. I think it's very important for all of us.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Jean Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am the prime sponsor on two of the telecommunication bills that are going through the process. There are a package of 5 telecommunication bills. I think the very most important one is one that will provide high-speed internet access to a number of areas of Colorado that don't have that benefit right now. In fact, even in Boulder County, there are some pockets that don't have high-speed internet access. And I envision it in terms of a little 10-year-old kid trying to do their homework at home in a community like Aspen Park or some other area that doesn't have these services should be on the same level playing field as a kid in the city of Boulder, or someone who's elderly benefiting from telehealth services in their own home. So I think this is an issue that's important in terms of not only telehealth and education, but also economic benefits to some of our rural areas that are having more trouble getting back on their feet. And also, it's a safety issue in terms of being able to provide some safety responses, emergency responses in certain areas of our state. And then I know I'm running out of time, but I wanted to also mention that I am also carrying a package of bills on child care assistance programs that I think are very important in terms of making sure that our limited income families not only do their children have high quality child care, but they are able to remain at work and accept raises and promotions and still receive this benefit so they can become self-sufficient.
Okay, thank you very much. And Senator Matt Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's so easy to say because we say it so often. Thanks so much for you and the league for putting this on. We appreciate it very much, and for your constructive role in the elections bills. I was one of the Senate sponsors on the recall bill. For me, it's it's said a lot, but it's true. Kids are our future, and we need to get this education work done and put as much money as we can into that. Secondly, on the flood, I need to make sure that bill that helps local governments fix their water treatment and their sewage treatment plants or wastewater plants is passed. We have the money in the budget, and we should be able to do that, and I'm helping Senator Nicholson on debris and streamside cleanup, that kind of thing, to prevent future floods as well. I'm looking forward to working with Representative Foote on oil and gas fines. They're way too low. And again, if you're going to put an industrial activity in people's neighborhoods, you better be doing it right, and it shouldn't be adversely affecting them. And finally, I'm going to be working on US 36 transparency. What happened on US 36 is not okay. It was not transparent. People didn't know what they were getting. They didn't have a real voice in that, and we're working to give people a voice in the process and also look at how long these things can go. 50 years, in my mind, is way too much, too many years. We'll all be dead by then, right? Probably. But I just want to finish by saying what others have said. We have a great team here, and I'm proud to be part of it, and working with people on these issues and really preparing the future of our state and our county as far as schools and jobs and the environment. And I'm just honored to represent people. I remind myself that every day, especially when I get a little upset about something, that I've been given a gift. And so thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. I think it's been very informative, and you have such wonderful knowledge that you can share. I want to thank Lisa Collins from Channel 22, the Boulder Valley School District, and the Boulder Valley School District for allowing us to use this room. I want to thank all the league people who have helped today, volunteering with questions and timekeeping, and the basic organization, and thank the audience for listening. Thank you.